While it's impossible to address the issues that come up with what makes a man, homosexuality and masculinity, both in Europe and the Arab world, beyond politics, we cannot discuss them without paying attention to the literary either. So let's start by talking about literature. If we consider the violence and the ideological battles at stake in this territory, with this project by two literary writers, one from Lebanon, one from Germany, one of the questions is if and how the literary is capable of mobilizing and displacing discursive structures and ideological formations, i.e., regimes of the representation of masculinity and sexuality at the crossroad of East and West. How does What Makes a Man as a literary text would work in this regard? How does its rhetoric, its performative function, its dialogic structure, its stylistic devices, its narrative elements possibly undo ideological and phantasmatic constructions of sexuality and gender, religion and ethnicity, the East and the West? Do they? But is What Makes a Man even a literary text? For the, let's say, semi-fictitious, and this has been up for debate, of course, account of Joachim Helfer's life, written by Rashid al-Daif, is countered with a sober report about sexual mores and gender politics in the West and East by Joachim Helfer. To be sure, al-Daif is using naivete and irony as means of both presenting homophobic discourse and also distancing himself at times from it. For example, after his son spent time with his mother in France, al-Daif writes, quote, "I was relieved by his return because it was easy for young men to become gay in France." When visiting Berlin in Helfer's presence, he's trying to cover up his arms and hands like a woman would cover her breasts, following the, of course, homophobic assumption that all gay men must be turned on by straight men, especially if they display hairy forearms and hands. So al-Daif can be funny, of course. His contribution is an ironic text about the East's perception of the West, including an imagined gay Western perception of Arab men. He's trying to turn the cliches about gay men into the stuff of comedy. Andreas Krass, in his article in What Makes a Man, writes, quote, "Al-Daif plays the heteronormative fool in order to challenge and even expose Arab stereotypes of homosexuality," end of quote. He is performing, quote, "an ironic, almost carnivalesque ritual of male heterosexuality," end of quote. But Helfer, in his response to al-Daif's text, is not in the mood for joking. That's funny too, in a way. Al-Daif's sometimes playful enactment of masculinity and homophobia is primarily countered in two ways by Helfer, spelling out the liberal values of secular Western cultures in distinction to sexual mores in Arab countries and reminding the reader of the existing violence against gay people, men in particular, in the Arab world and Europe. Helfer has been criticized for being a bad sport. But, quote, "what may be funny in a straight man's world may be annoying in a gay man's world," end of quote. Andreas Krass suggests, and I think he also has a point when he writes, quote, "while irony and satire might be suited for questioning heteronormative stereotypes, they do not necessarily allow for establishing a reasonable and open-minded view on gay people and same-sex love," end of quote. So what is happening in this encounter, or should we say in this failed encounter, between al-Daif and Helfer when homosexuality and masculinity in the Arab world and Europe are up for debate? Is this a dialogue? Or haven't we already reached a point of discursive impasse before the conversation has even started? And if that is the case, could this impasse in itself be productive